In my early 20s, I fancied myself a seasoned urban explorer, drawn to the forgotten places where humanity had vanished and nature had reclaimed its hold. I had already ventured deep into the world of abandoned buildings, lonely, decayed, and steeped in silence long before this particular story unfolded. The ruins I explored always left me with an eerie sense of awe, and I prided myself on capturing them through the lens of my camera. But it was the summer of 2008 when things took a darker turn. A co-worker of mine whispered rumors of an old abandoned coal mine hidden in the dense woods behind our rural South Dakota department store. The forest surrounding our workplace was vast and shadowy, so I wasn't surprised to hear such a place lurked within. What did surprise me was the way my co-worker's voice faltered when he spoke of it, like he had seen something best left undisturbed. Curiosity gripped me, and despite his hesitant warnings, I convinced my friend Ray to join me on this adventure. My co-worker muttered something about strange occurrences in the mine, but I brushed it off, eager for the thrill. We gathered our gear: cameras, heavy-duty flashlights, bandanas to keep out the dust, and a sense of unearned confidence. As we drove to the store's parking lot, the sun sat high in the sky, casting long shadows across the gravel path leading into the forest. A yellow chain barred the path with a sign stating visiting hours, but we ignored it, stepping into the dark embrace of the woods. The air felt heavier, more oppressive as we moved deeper. My co-worker had told me to take the first gravel path off to the right, and sure enough, there was a clearing ahead. I pulled my bandana over my mouth, glancing at Ray as we stood before the gaping mouth of the tunnel. A foul stench lingered in the air. I clicked on my flashlight, its beam cutting through the dense shadows. Dust swirled like angry spirits, choking my lungs as I stepped onto the wet, rocky ground of the mine. The tunnel walls glistened with moisture, graffiti scrawled haphazardly across them, angry, jagged symbols that felt like they had been etched with malice. Ray's footsteps echoed beside me as we sloshed through the shallow, murky water pooling beneath our feet. We pressed on, our breath louder in the suffocating quiet. A strange light caught our attention, natural light, pouring through a jagged hole in the tunnel ceiling. As we ventured deeper, the graffiti became more sporadic and the water rose around our ankles, cold and biting. The tunnel curved, and soon the entrance was nothing more than a memory behind us. The water was now calf deep, and the air had turned stale, thick with the metallic tang of rot. Up ahead, the tunnel opened into a room, its wooden support beams barely holding the structure together. The graffiti here was different, ominous, grotesque symbols twisted across the walls. The words painted on the beams were unsettling, cryptic phrases that sent a chill down my spine. It was hard to breathe now, the air thick with decay and something else, something unseen, but felt. As we moved further, the light flickered, and the oppressive atmosphere of the mine seemed to close in around us. This room didn't belong. It was wrong, out of place, as if we had stumbled into something that should have remained hidden, something watching us from the shadows. The floor beneath us was rough and jagged, a sharp contrast to the smooth surface ahead and behind. This room, however, was different, elevated just a few inches above the rest of the tunnel, dry while the rest of the mine was submerged in murky water. The wooden beams that supported the ceiling were splattered with fresh graffiti, but the words scrawled on them were chilling. Turn back. Stop. The final beam, though, sent a shiver down my spine. Burn. We tried to shrug off the ominous messages, pushing forward as the natural light from the hole above dimmed, leaving us to descend once again into the flooded depths. Silence surrounded us now, with no more graffiti, no strange rooms, just the cold, wet tunnel stretching endlessly ahead. The dirty water had risen to our ankles, and after what felt like a mile of trudging through the dark, Ray suddenly stopped. He turned to me, eyes wide and filled with terror, then flicked off his flashlight, motioning urgently for me to do the same. Annoyed, but curious, I did as he asked. We stood there, swallowed by darkness, the only sound the soft dripping of water echoing through the tunnel. My heart raced as Ray whispered, "I think I heard something." I strained my ears, but all I could hear was the steady drip of water. "Nothing," I told him, trying to brush it off, but the uneasy feeling creeping up my spine wouldn't let go. We turned our lights back on, the tunnel reappearing in our beams, but it wasn't the same. Something felt wrong. My chest tightened, and for the first time in all my explorations, I felt real fear. A deep, crawling dread, like we were somewhere we shouldn't be. As we moved forward, the air grew thicker, almost suffocating. I cursed myself for not bringing respirators. The air in the mine was foul, laced with dust and something else. Something rancid. The water was still at our ankles, and with the graffiti far behind us, it was as if we had crossed into an untouched part of the earth. And then, the whispering began. It was faint at first, like the wind hissing through the tunnel, but it grew clearer with every step. My heart sank into my stomach, my body locking up in pure terror. It wasn't Ray, it was coming from deeper in the mine. Someone was speaking, but the words, they were fast, nonsensical. Gibberish, like someone muttering in a twisted language. I stopped dead in my tracks, my hand shooting out to grab Ray's arm. He turned off his light again, and we were plunged into complete darkness. The whispering continued, closer now, as if the person was moving toward us. Ray's voice trembled as he whispered, "We need to get out of here." His eyes were wide, reflecting the sheer terror we both felt. The gibberish grew louder, more frantic, and with it came the unmistakable sound of metal scraping sharp and deliberate. The noise sliced through the air, sending chills through my entire body. I steadied my breathing, trying to convince myself that whoever it was needed help. I flicked my light back on, against Ray's protests, and began walking faster toward the source. The sounds became more aggressive, the voice rising into a fevered pitch. My body shook with fear, every step feeling like it was leading me to something worse than death. And then I saw it. About 100 yards ahead, my flashlight illuminated a side tunnel, one we hadn't seen before. Bright, neon yellow arrows pointed toward its entrance, freshly painted on the walls, as if someone or something was leading us there. I snapped a picture, my hand trembling, and the moment the camera flashed, the whispering stopped. The silence was deafening. I wiped the sweat from my forehead, looking over at Ray, who had already started backing away in panic. I took one hesitant step toward the side tunnel when the most blood-curdling scream erupted from deep within. Ray and I both screamed in terror, adrenaline taking over as we bolted down the flooded tunnel. The water splashed violently as we sprinted, slipping and stumbling. The deranged man's voice exploding behind us, screaming unintelligible words, some clear, some utter madness. The screeching echoed off the rocky walls, chasing us with a relentless fury. His voice was inhuman, filled with rage and malice, like a demon tearing through the darkness, its every word soaked in venom. We ran for our lives, but his voice followed, growing louder, more twisted. It was a sound I will never forget, a sound that will haunt me for eternity. I could hear rapid footsteps pounding behind us, chasing us through the pitch-black mine as Ray and I sprinted for our lives. We were swearing, cursing, and screaming, caught in the most heart-wrenching terror I've ever felt. My heart was pounding in my throat as I dared to glance back, my flashlight bouncing wildly. Confused, I caught sight of him. The deranged man had stopped running. He wasn't screaming anymore. He just stood there, his shadow stretching across the damp walls, watching us. His eyes gleamed in the darkness like a predator stalking its prey. It was as if the act of watching, waiting, was more unnerving than the chase. Ray and I stumbled to a stop, panting, coughing as the air grew thicker, staler. My lungs burned with each breath, and the horrifying realization hit me like a punch to the gut. We were still a mile from the entrance. "We need to get the hell out of here," Ray rasped, his voice trembling, spiraling into a fit of deep, ragged coughs. I swept my flashlight over the tunnel walls, no graffiti, no signs of escape. We were deep, far too deep. But we didn't have time to rest because the man... He started speaking again, his voice low and pleading. "Please, please come back. I'm so lonely down here." His words echoed in the tunnel, bouncing off the walls, haunting us. His voice cracked, desperate, as if he hadn't spoken in years. "You'll get used to it. I promise. Just stay a while." Ray's wide, terrified eyes locked with mine. We were both frozen, listening to his pitiful, maniacal pleas. The words hung in the air like poison. I shoved my camera into my backpack and motioned to Ray run. We didn't need to hear any more. We bolted. The filthy water splashed around our legs as we sprinted through the vile tunnel, our breaths coming in ragged gasps. But the man wasn't done with us. As soon as he heard us moving, his tone shifted. His voice, once pleading, now turned dark and twisted, dripping with malice. "You think you can leave? You think I'll let you go?" he screamed. The things he said next, the vile, obscene threats, things I can't even bring myself to repeat, made my blood run cold. I knew then that if we didn't escape, we would never see daylight again. We pushed harder, using the jagged walls for support, the brown, stagnant water soaking us from head to toe. The tunnel seemed endless, suffocating. My chest screamed with every breath, the air too thick, too foul. And then finally, the tunnel opened up into the large room with the wooden pillars, the place where it all began. The man's voice was distant now, his unhinged screams echoing faintly behind us. We slowed down, our legs shaking, lungs burning. But there was no relief, just the weight of survival crushing down on us. I remember the sheer, overwhelming relief when we saw the dim glow of natural light ahead. The exit, that thin beam of sunlight, was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. We burst out of the tunnel, into the cool evening air, the setting sun bathing our faces. For the first time in hours, I felt human again. We never told the police. How could we? We were trespassing, deep in a mine where no one was supposed to go. And besides, who would believe us? In the 10 years since that horrifying day, I've never gone back to that place, and I never will. I'd be lying if I said that was my last bad experience. But it was the worst. Sometimes when my friends bring up tunnels or talk about underground places, I still feel those same cold shivers crawl up my spine. Those memories of that dark, suffocating mine, of the man's voice, filled with madness, will stay with me forever.